This is the Soul Podcast, now in 3D Blu-ray. I'm King Sejong, reminding you that those who cannot remember the past can easily find work in Korea as an ESL teacher. And here are your hosts, Emma Kalka and Joe McPherson.
And welcome to the Soul Podcast. This is Joe.
And I'm Emma.
And I'm Mike, I guess.
Mike is here. Michael Hurt, the veteran of the Soul Podcast, is here today. I'm really doing the radio show voice today. I sound like really.
Sorry, was it my pre-recorded bits that got you into it?
Yeah, really doing it. So anyway, we're back and we are going to start talking about a little show you might have heard of called
maybe
Ojingo Game, or is it Squid Game?
Squid Game.
I like the Korean name better, honestly.
Ojingo Game. It kind of flows off the tongue.
Game. Ojingo
Flows
Game.
better.
Ojingo.
Yeah,
Because squid is just so but
yeah.
like because I heard about it because my Netflix is in Korea, but it's set in the English language because it switches. Even the titles switch to different languages. So I got the advertisement for Squid Game coming next month or whatever. I was like, does that mean Ojingo Game? That's because Squid Game sounds kind of awkward, even though that's the first way I heard about it.
I know Squid Game sounds so weird in English. Yeah. Yeah. And it was sitting on there and we get these advertisements for Korean shows and some of them are good. I mean, a year ago, almost a year, we got Itaewon Class was a year and a half ago. My gosh.
That was a good
I enjoyed it. And,
Still haven't watched it.
It's pretty good. That's the thing. I mean, I can preface my whole thing by saying I don't like Korean dramas. Well, I don't like dramas. I don't like soap operas.
I don't like soap operas, but I kind of like what things are going now. The thing is the ones I've watched, they don't really stick the landings that well.
Well, I mean, my thing is, people have asked me because people ask you if you like certain kind of Korean cultural contents, as people say now. Do you like K-pop? Do you like they'll ask you, do you like K-cinema? Are you a drama fan, or do you like K-drama? And I'm like, no, I don't like K-drama. Because I don't like the traditional, the big dramas, the love stories, the three-way triangles, and the so
the tropes.
When I saw, I was told to watch Sky Castle. I avoided it for like a year. It was on Netflix. I was like, I'm not into Korean dramas. And then I just watched the first episode, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, got me."
The first episodes always get you in. That's what it is. And honestly, I think the ones I've watched, the second episodes tend to be better than the first epidos.
Yeah, because they have to get you, then they have to make you stick.
Yeah. So what we're gonna do. This is our format. Is we're gonna discuss 2 episodes a week. We're going to discuss Squid Game, episodes 1 and 2. Episode 1 is red light, green light in English, or is it 무궁화 꽃이 피었나? And
honestly, I never play these games I didn't grow up in Korea, so. I know red light, green light. I didn't know the way it was played in Korea.
Yeah, and I like the way it's played in Korea. It's but you can kind of predict when it's going to go to red light.
It's more rhythmic.
Yeah, it's more rhythmic. And in America, it's red light. You don't know when they're going to say red light. I mean, you watch the Bugs Bunny cartoon where he's going red light, green light. It's like can't tell when he's going to do it.
Well, I saw, because I kind of forgot how it's played, because, childhood was a long time ago.
Right.
So I looked it up on internet, on the YouTube, and so I saw some kids playing red light, green light, and they say yellow light, apparently.
What?
And kids jumping back and forth and try to surprise you with the red light part, and they catch you that way.
Yeah.
But, so
kids have gotten smarter.
So I guess, well, that's an added element. So, but in America, it's more like trying to catch you and make you, violate the freeze rule.
Yeah.
Where I think it's more your mistake if you can't get the rhythm in the when the girl's singing "Mugunghwa Piyasumida," and then if you're moving, you just deserve to die. So
Yeah.
but I mean, I guess that the way I saw it being played in the Korean version, it looks more fun, and it kind of makes you more tempted to want to play because you remember the old guy, the smile on his face when everybody was clear that you get shot and that you die. He was like, "Yeah, now it's on." And
yeah. Point out. We are going to discuss. So I suggest people have already watched these episodes when we talk. I will point out Emma's only gotten through to episode 5 so far as we record.
I got in through the first 10 minutes of 5. I had to take a break because I had watched 3, 4, and I had to watch the beginning of episode 5, so I knew what happened. And then I was just like, okay, we got to stop for the night. It's like 11. It's 10:30. I have to get up at like 6 in the morning. So I need to start thinking about going to bed soon. And this is going to take some time to process.
So we're going to need to be in our best behavior to try not to give any big reveals.
Keep it to episode 1 and 2.
We'll try to. And also we talk about the other episode is Gihon. Yeah.
So which game did we get to exactly in episodes 1 and 2? Which game should I not talk about?
I think in episode 1 and 2, all we have is we have red light. We just have the one red light, green light. Because episode 2 it's back kind of out in the real world. Oh, again, spoilers for anybody watching. There will be spoilers, so probably don't watch this podcast or listen to it unless I
recommend watching the whole show before. Yeah,
watch the whole series.
Yeah.
The only problem I foresee is if we end up talking about translation issues, one of the parts of the things that she discussed is from the much later game.
Okay, so we're gonna discuss that, and I think that would be okay. Before we get started, Emma's going to give us a quick synopsis to remind us of what happened in the first 2 episodes.
Episode 1, Red Light, Green Light. The episode opens showing the life of the main character, Gihon. After a divorce, he lives with his elderly mother and is miserable, receiving money from his mother to buy his only daughter Gyeong's birthday present. Currently, Gyeong is being raised by his ex-wife who remarried. Gihon secretly uses his mother's money to gamble at the horse races. After a few ups and downs, Gihon manages to win 4.56 million won. But as he is leaving, he's cornered by a loan shark who then takes all his money and forces him to sign away his organs if he doesn't pay the money back. He manages to win a prize in a crane machine for Gyeong's present, but discovers it is a pistol lighter while taking her out for fish cakes and dokboki. He promises to take care of her next year on her birthday, but Gyeong hesitates before agreeing. While waiting in annoyance after missing the subway, a man in a mysterious suit appears and proposes a childhood game, dakji, offering 100,000 won for every square that Gihon flips and a punch for everyone that the mysterious man flips. Despite being punched repeatedly, Gihon continues, eventually winning a decent sum of money. The man makes another proposal revealing that he knows Gihon's name, job, circumstances, and debt. He then offers Gihon a Squid Game business card, telling him to call soon as there aren't many spots left. Gihon stops by a fish shop run by the mother of a school friend, Sangwoo, who went to Seoul National University and is portrayed as being successful. He then brags to his mother at home that he is earning money. However, he learns that Gyeong is moving to the United States with her mother and stepdad. His mother asks if he can live without seeing Gyeong and begs him to try and get her back. That night, Gihon, unable to sleep, decides to participate in the Squid Game by calling the number written on the business card. He then meets a van driven by a man in the mask. After giving the password, the flower Mugunghwa has bloomed. He enters and is gassed, putting him to sleep. Gihon then wakes up in a strange dorm in a green tracksuit with the number 456 on it with hundreds of others. He meets player 1, Il-nam, who is dying of brain cancer. An altercation then breaks out between player 101, Doksu, a gangster, who is beating up player 67, Sebyok, a North Korean refugee. Kyun helps break up the fight, and we see Ali, number 199, a migrant worker, and Sang-woo, number 218, Kyun's friend. A door opens and several people dressed in odd suits and masks enter. After a brief welcome, the rules are established. They will participate in 6 games over the next 6 days. When several players express their distrust, the main person then states personal information, showing that everyone is in some sort of debt and they have the chance to continue with the games and potentially win money, or continue living like garbage, being chased by debt collectors. All continue on in the game, signing an agreement. The game agreement contained the following items. Number 1, participants may not arbitrarily stop the game. Number 2, a participant who refuses to play will be disqualified. And number 3, the game may be stopped if a majority of the participants agree. The players are then taken to a playground where there is a giant robot in the shape of a young girl at a tree. An announcement is made explaining the game, green light, red light. Whoever passes the finish line within 5 minutes will continue on. Those who don't or are caught moving when red light is called out will be eliminated. At first, the participants take it lightly, thinking it a simple game. When movement is first detected, the player is shot. Chaos breaks out as the players realize that is how they are to be eliminated, and many are gunned down. Number 1, Ilnam continues on with the game while many others stay frozen, and then eventually they all begin to take part. Sang-woo tells Kyun to stay behind someone else to avoid detection. While running, Kyun's ankle is grabbed by another player, but he leaves him to die. However, just a few moments later, he nearly falls, in danger of being killed, but is caught by Ali. Gihon and Ali dramatically cross the finish line with 1 second left and survive, while all others who did not pass are shot and killed. As a result of the game, 255 people die, with 201 people remaining. Episode 2, Hell. The episode opens with agents disposing of the bodies of those who died in the first game, killing one who managed to survive. In the dorm, the survivors are in shock. The masked group returns, informing them that 255 people were eliminated. Many of the players fall to their knees, begging to be let free with their lives. They are then reminded that they cannot stop the games, and if they refuse to participate, they will be eliminated. Sang-woo then reminds them of the last rule, that if a majority of the players agree, the games will end. Before they take a vote, the prize money is revealed. This affects the vote, which comes down to Ilnam, player number 1, at 100 to 100. He chooses to end the game, and all participants are told they will be released, but the opportunity to return remains open. They then return to reality. Sang-woo is with Ali and buys him food at a convenience store and allows him to use his phone, but he is getting tons of messages about his loans. Ali goes to his boss to receive his pay, but gets into an altercation and runs off with the money, which he uses to send his family home to Pakistan. He then realizes he has no choice but to return to Squid Game to get the money to return himself. Dolksu is jumped by a gang, manages to flee, and realizes that he too must return to the game. Sebyok visits her brother and realizes she must return to the game to get money to bring the rest of her family to South Korea. Kyun attempts to tell the police about what happened, but is laughed out of the station. His mother then collapses, and in the hospital it's discovered that she is suffering complications from diabetes and needs surgery. Kyun looks everywhere for the money and is offered it from his ex-wife's new husband, who says that if he takes it, he must stay away from his family. Embarrassed and angry, Kyun throws the money back. He then runs into Sang-woo asking if everything he heard in Squid Game is true. Sang-woo replies that he invested in futures, which Kyun doesn't understand. Sang-woo then leaves and attempts to commit suicide in a motel, but is interrupted by a knock on the door, and the Squid Game card is slid under. While drinking at a 7-Eleven, Kyun comes across Ilnam. Ilnam says he wishes to enjoy what is left of his life and that he is returning to the game, and that only he seems to understand what the management said about there being hell. Meanwhile, a detective, Junho, who witnessed Gihon at the police station, hears that his older brother is missing. He goes to his Goshiwan and finds the Squid Game card. He then finds Gihon, asking about his claim and to help him find his brother. Gihon says it was a prank. When he returns home, he finds another Squid Game card. He then decides to return to the game. Unknowingly, Junho is watching him, and after Gihon gets into the van, he follows.
And thank you, Emma. All right, so let's discuss it. The reason we have Mike on is Mike grew up in a sort of, you would you say you grew up in a Korean household?
Oh yeah, my mom is Korean, so that would make the house. And my mom was single, and then I had a stepdad. But in in terms of the Korean influence,
Yeah.
there was Korean in the household. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it's not a Korean household in that I had two Korean parents, and we went to like Korean church and did all Korean things all the time. But yeah, there was Korean influence in the house.
You had some Korean language fluency.
No, no, because there was no Korean crosstalk.
Oh, there wasn't.
So, and my mom tried to be like she, speak Korean with us, and she was like, she told me she would pull me aside and be like, try to speak Korean, make it a Korean thing, but I just looked at her like she was crazy.
That's what my daughter does to me. Speaking English.
You know the deal.
Yeah. I've met your mom. She's amazing. Well, we brought you on because there was a TikToker that's actually made the news, BBC and such, that talked about how the translations are not accurate, and we're going to discuss that. And I felt that Mike would be good because Mike, you've done the translation stuff before.
Yeah,
you actually have experience translating.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I don't know if you thought of me because I chimed in on that Twitter conversation, because I hardly ever do Twitter, but I saw her come up, and then I watched her video, and I was like, oh my god, I'm really annoyed right now, or as people say these days, triggered.
You were triggered. You're triggered.
I had to put in my 2 cents.
Oh god, on Twitter? You on Twitter?
Yeah, so I hardly use it. So I went in and I just said, some things. I had one of those multiple Twitter things.
Oh my.
And so I don't think I started a fight or anything, but there was a conversation.
Okay, good.
So.
All right. Yeah, we got to be careful. You and me, us being middle-aged males and going on to Twitter, talking to young women.
Oh, well, I try not to talk to anyone. I don't want to end up like William Shatner.
But anyway, you've translated a very famous film into English.
I did the subtitles for the host Quemo with Mr. Bone, and I've done some large subtitling projects for the government for a government grant. So I've had professional translations, kind of. I would say subtitling, which is different from like bulk translation. Yeah. So I've done it for, in the big leagues a little bit. And I'm not a super expert like Mr. Darcy Paquette, who actually got me the Quemo host gig way back in the day. But yeah, I know a few things.
So what would you say are the challenges of subtitles versus like other types of translation?
I think the problem with subtitles is you got to get you got to convey what's going on screen, and you got to do it in around the same time frame as what's happening on the screen, so that people can keep up. And you got to do it in like character length limits. You can't just, because I've seen one of the examples I like to talk about is you've all seen 8 Mile, Eminem's. Remember the rap battle at the end, which is very cultural referencey. It also involves specific kinds of cultural practices like dissing people, and it also involves the necessity to rhyme in English, and you can kind of feel where the conversation is to go. You put somebody in a tough spot. How do you rhyme and rhetorically, fight your way out of this, situation in the battle? And as we see in the movie, he destroys the other guy to the point where there's no debate about who won. And you have to do that in not only Korean, but you've got to do it it's sort of like translating poetry, I think. You've got to make it work within the genre that you're translating.
Oh my, that's crazy hard.
It's super hard, and it's an art form unto itself. So
yeah, and I would like to point out, I mean, I think this has gotten so big because Squid Game is like really the first Netflix show, something like really big international show where Americans are reading subtitles or they're listening to translations that much. And so this is coming to the surface, and they're acting like that this is new, and that it's somehow, I don't know. I mean, they're trying to put the blame on someone, and I don't know who they can blame on, because I've gone to Hollywood movies in Korea, blockbuster movies, like, I mean, I'm a big Star Wars, Star Trek stuff, and Marvel, and I find myself laughing at parts, and I look at the Korean subtitle, and I'm intermediate Korean. I'm not great, intermediate, but I can see that the translation in Korean is not even close to what they're saying. They're just trying to shorten it because, we got to get to the next part. So I end up being the only one laughing in the theater.
And, back in the day, like, I would say like 2000, when did Blade 3 come out? Like mid 2000s.
Okay.
So I had this experience in the theater. In Blade 3, there's a scene where Ryan Reynolds, who is now known for being Ryan Reynolds, but he was like nobody back then. But he was like the vampire killer team, whatever. He was captured by Parker Posey, who was somehow in that film, and hilarious.
Wow, Parker Posey. Wow.
She was over-the-top vampire S, so she was going at it, and then she's interrogating him for the code or the frequency. I don't remember, but Ryan Reynolds is busy being Ryan Reynolds, like times 1,000, and he's like, so she's like, give me the key or I'll kill your friends. I'll turn you into a vampire. And he's like, well, he responds in the Ryan Reynolds way. He's like, well, somebody woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, or just the way he does it. And yeah, so he's going at it, and the way he's saying things, the way he's carrying out his resistance to their torture is hilarious. And I'm actually about to throw up laughing, and the Korean audience is sitting there getting angry. And I can tell they're not angry at me so much as they're angry at the fact they have no idea why this is funny. And I think it was a little bit harder back then because that kind of irony / humor didn't really work at all in Korea. And even though I thought they were translating what he was saying, he would say things like, isn't there a little bit too much testosterone in this room? Or I forgot what he said, but saying funny things that if you just translate the meaning, they're not funny. But in the way that he says it, it's funny. But the funny thing is, later on, when Deadpool came out, I remember this. Well, I think, Deadpool was, would be hilarious. I think Ryan Reynolds is hilarious. So I went to see Deadpool in the theater.
Yeah.
And, he's just completely, he's like, well, Marsha, Jan, the middle one, and making all these references.
Yeah, pop culture that Koreans won't get. Yeah.
And I'm thinking the Koreans are going to be like, what is going on? But they're laughing hysterically at the exact same spots. I'm looking at the thing, and I vaguely remember there's a translation that I remember I'm not sure if it was in Deadpool, but I'm pretty sure it was, where I think somebody made a reference to, it's all about Marsha. And I was like, the Korean audience cannot get that. Like, I was like, so I looked at the subtitles as it was coming. I was like, oh, I didn't know this reference. The subtitler had made a reference to some Korean 1980s, 70s show that has a similar character and translated with that character's name. And the Korean audience was like, ha ha ha. Thought it was really funny.
See, that's smart. So that's someone with some cultural smarts. And that's what I think it is. I think when doing subtitles, I think it's more helpful that if someone is translating it to Korean, it should be someone who knows Korean culture, grew up in Korean culture, and translating to English, someone who grew up in that culture, because then they're able to pull from that bag and pull that in there.
That's where it becomes an art form, and you have to respect the translator as much as you respect the original author.
Yeah.
Because from the audience's receiving point of view, the original author is important, but you wouldn't get what that person's saying or why it's good unless the translator was freaking good.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the Netflix translators were native speakers, because there was something I saw somewhere. It wasn't in the subtitles. It was something like a title or something. Maybe it was an episode title where it was grammatically awkward. It felt grammatically Korean, the way it was translated in English. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Well, one thing that people talk about, and this is the strategy that I think is key, is in translation theory, there's kind of two directions. This is from this famous book in the field, the invisibility, the translator's invisibility. So you have the idea of domesticating translation and foreignizing translation. So, for example, Marsha comes up. You can just say Marsha in Hangul, Marsha, and just hope the audience maybe gets it. You get a chuckle. And you kind of educate the audience by keeping it accurate. Maybe they'll go on the internet and look up Marsha, and maybe find Brady Bunch, maybe find a Naver page that explains it, but probably not. They'll just miss it.
Yeah.
You definitely miss it in the moment, and then you failed as a translator, as a subtitler. Or you could say, oh, why is it always about Sujong or whatever, if that's the character in the Korean show. And then the audience laughs and totally gets it. And it's not accurate. It's domesticating. It's not foreignizing translation. So you've domesticated that content, and it becomes technically not word for word accurate. So you've taken a liberty that helps convey the final point of the moment, of the bigger meaning. And I think that's always been a debate, and it always comes up, in translation. And if you remember back to Parasite, that's the big accolade that Darcy Paquette received when he translated. What's the dish that's the mixture of the
Japaguri.
Japaghetti plus the
nagori,
the ramen or what?
Yeah. It's a black bean ramen with a spicy red ramen.
Yeah, which is a combination, and it's a food that doesn't exist other than in this family. They made up a name for it, and I'm forgetting the name.
They came up with a new name. Did they come up with a new name for it?
So Darcy came up with a similar combined name that made sense in English. That was the analog for the way it was combined in Korean, and people were like, "Slow clap." Amazing. I'm blanking on the word right now, but that's kind of domestic.
Yeah, damdong or something like that. Something dong, I thought it was.
Something dong, right. Yeah, I think people can look it up, but that's the basic point, is you adapt to the equivalent, and you make the choice to not slavishly just translate the words or the sounds.
But there are times when I do think that you should just stick to the Korean. There's one episode coming up, and they didn't bother translating the title into English, and that's because one of the characters explains what that word means.
Yeah,
and I think it's a very it's a word that really goes on to the end of the series. It's very important. So there are times with that.
There are like cultural contexts, and there's how much people understand about the culture that affects exactly that. So, for example, you wouldn't translate kimchi. You don't translate sushi in the 80s, even when Americans didn't know much about Japanese culture. You're not going to say, oh, raw fish, it's just sushi. People know what sushi is.
Yeah.
Nowadays, kimchi, you wouldn't be like, oh, please pass me the plate of fermented cabbage. People like,
it feels so awkward.
Yeah,
spicy fermented cabbage.
Still, though, they still have trouble with translating oppa, things like that.
Yeah. So I think if you translate that, I mean, I'm going to get a little bit explicit, but if you translate something like, okay, let's say it was a sex scene, and the person said, oppa, like, do me harder or whatever. If you translate it as big brother, people would be like,
they're like, what is going on?
So you would translate the equivalent. I don't know. I mean, I think to go as far as to say, nail me, Big Daddy, is probably not that. But if you were to go in the direction of Poppy,
I was going to say Poppy,
which doesn't mean like you are my father, but I mean, it's a common kind of convention, not in English, but I think people know that oppa doesn't. If you use Poppy or I don't know some equivalent. I mean, translating that would be better than translating it as Big Brother, because people are like, oh, is this incest? What's going on? I'm confused. If you have to think about it, then it's confusing, too confusing, and that's not good to take the audience out of the moment.
Like I know I was talking about with my coworker Jay, we were actually talking about the translations, and she's Korean, but she's very fluent in English, and we were kind of discussing how even like translating subtitles can be really different because, like you said, there's a lot of terms and words and stuff in Korean that don't have like a direct translation into English, or the direct translation doesn't actually match up to what it really means. And a lot of that depends on context, like the situation,
And sometimes they
like
overdo it.
use. Yeah.
Remember Mad TV with their Korean drama parody?
Hmm.
And like someone would just say one word and they put like 3 paragraphs up to explain
I
it.
think that's making fun of some bad translation, in that sometimes with bootleg translations I used to come across when back in the days of Mad Men, when it wasn't available in Korea but people were watching so-called Miguk drama, American dramas like crazy. You'd get unprofessional, untrained, unofficial translations, illegal translations, and I have the Eminem 8 Mile movie, the bootleg disc, and I have the official, legal disc, and the translations are crazy different. In the rap battle, there's actually a paragraph, like explaining, American rap battles are doing this kind of activity, and they're doing this kind of cultural footnote, and it's useful and it's good if you're ready for that sort of thing. But technically, according to translation, conventions, you shouldn't be making some kind of footnote to explain what's going on. You can't.
Yeah, and these days we had the internet to do this. So, for example, one thing people were talking about was, I think it was episode 2, when Gihon is talking to Sang-woo, and Sang-woo's telling him about how he got into trouble, and he says something about the joke is that Gihon. Sang-woo's talking about some type of financial derivative, but I think he was using songmul or something like that, the word for gift.
He was talking about futures.
Yeah, he's talking about futures. Yeah, and Gihon misunderstood. He thought he was talking about a literal gift, and it was a pun that Gihon was misunderstanding what he's saying, which is it would fly over someone that wasn't paying attention to the Korean part.
Yeah, so I thought the English, I think because the English does match up with the Korean term and kind of has, so if you were speaking to an uneducated person who doesn't know what financial futures or futures markets are, and you say the word futures, you'd be like, oh, mire? Like looking into the future, you say something similarly uninformed. So when he said sunmul, which in Chinese character, before thing, like before looking at the thing before investing before, I guess, betting on future. But he thought it just meant present, which is the uneducated answer. So it's kind of this.
Oh, so like a present. He thought it was acting on the present.
What do you mean a present? Well, you can't give presents, which is the no. And he said, I remember he said, "그런 거 있어." Like that. There's that kind of thing. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah, and so they said, like in the Japanese version, he was talking about derivatives, and they were using the libatib, and that Gihon misunderstood it as delivery.
Oh, so that's a nice translation, I think, because if to sound intelligent, I guess in the Japanese version, I don't speak Japanese, I don't do Japanese. Derivative, and to make him sound like the uninformed one, delivery, like what do you mean delivery? Then it kind of I think that's a nice.
There's some good ones.
Nice move.
What were some specific ones the TikToker was complaining about? What were some things that really were lost?
She was talking about the not conveying the full cultural import of the word Ganbu. And I was like, no.
Oh, that's later on. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's fine. You can talk about it.
Yeah, I don't think that actually
you can spoil me. That's all right. I might need to be spoiled a little bit so I can make it through the series.
Well, it's coming up. It's episode 6. I think
okay. Well, I'm almost there anyway.
I don't think that's going to spoil her. We can talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought, it's not a Korean word that I learned, because I learned Korean from a textbook, and I learned Korean in, recent life. It's not something I grew up with. So, Ganbu is just a pure Korean word that, it's news to me. And even when he talked about, oh, this is what a Ganbu is.
Yeah, he explains it.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, okay, thank you, because frankly, a lot of younger Koreans don't know what it is. So
I thought it was just the name of a chicken chain.
Yeah, because Ganbu chicken is the chicken chain because it's an old-fashioned word.
Wow. And I was like,
friends or whatever. So like when she was like, no, Ganbu has this deep and unique meaning in the Korean. I'm like, we don't but that's the thing about translation. For me to get that scene and generally get it, I don't need to know. I don't need to go to like do academic research about the full meaning of Jung, how. Like, you don't need all that stuff. It's just like an old friend from the hood, like your homeboy, whatever.
Yeah.
However you want to liberally translate it.
Your BFF.
Yeah. And her being mad about that, I was like, that's a lot. Like,
I'm expecting a lot of an audience there.
I mean, this is not the standard expectation of most translations, interpretations.
Yeah.
So, and if you can convey that on the fly, those kinds of deeper meanings or feelings of, like, for example, how you just explained in the Japanese, how derivative mispronounces, like a person could misunderstand it be delivery, and then you look stupid in the text, and that's the point.
Yeah.
If you can do that, if you can make that great move on the fly. Let's say there's a Dutch person who has to do that, like almost simultaneous translation and get that point across. If you can think of that stuff just off the cuff, man, you're good.
Yeah, but, that's something that bugs me too, because this is cool. We have a Korean word that likely now Ganbu likely will be in the Oxford Dictionary in a few years from now because it was introduced in this show, and still you got someone who has to be a gatekeeper of the culture, who doesn't even live in the country, complaining about it.
So that's the thing that bothered me a bit because, because I was doing Korean studies before there was the field called Korean studies. Back when people were like, "Oh, you can't work in this field. There's nobody doing Korea. You only do Japan or China as a field," and then you kind of sideways slide into Korea.
What year was that?
This is like when I started my dissertation. So like. The 99, 2000, 2001.
Because that's right. When I was studying Korean history because I was like, oh my God, there's Korean history here. It was around 98 when I did that. Yeah.
That was not something you did, but I forgot what were we talking. It just went in that direction. I forgot what we were talking about.
We're talking about
being inside
gatekeepers.
the country, gatekeepers. Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of what I call carpetbaggers, people who couldn't give two craps about Korea back in the day. When it wasn't cool, like I speak specifically of Korean Americans. So this is my pet peeve. Like Korean Americans who wanted nothing to do with anything Korean back in the 90s or the early 2000s because Korea was, where your grandma and your parents, like are annoying. And it's just like that family culture. You don't want anything to do with it. It's not cool. But suddenly now it's cool. You're trying to go viral. You're trying to be that gatekeeper. And you didn't pay your dues. You didn't give a crap. You weren't here. And I kind of felt like she was just trying to go viral and trying to be a gatekeeper because she's of Korean descent and frankly doesn't know a lot about translation of the field or the issues that she's talking about.
It's the thing that bugs me. I mean, I understand I'm a foreigner here, but it does. I'm actually paying the dues. I'm actually paying the taxes. I'm actually immersed. Working, I've experienced a lot here. I've been through the court system here. I've been through the hospital system here. I've owned businesses here. I've had children here, and still, it's like I get dismissed. By someone who's only summered here.
Yeah, that's the thing is. A lot of folks who want to be gatekeepers now or want to jump on that bandwagon now are people who, and I'm speaking specifically about friends or acquaintances I've had in grad school. I remember being at a party, grad student party, which is the most unfun party there is, and be like, oh, what do you do? And I talked to a Korean American woman who, and I was like, oh, I'm doing like Korean stuff, and I'm thinking about Korean national identity. I'm doing all this Korean stuff. And she basically was like, yo, dude, I don't do Korean shit. Don't come at me with that crap. Like, I'm Korean American. I'm not doing Korean stuff. And then who did I see up in the middle of Seoul, actually not too long ago, doing ethnographic fieldwork? I'm like, oh, suddenly you
same person.
Right. So, So anyway, but there's a lot of that these days. So I kind of felt like that pushed my little button on that point. And I'm like, you're the kind of person that, Joe, if you went to, I think these days, a university seminar and we're talking about my experience. You wrote a book, my experience, lived life in Korea, life in the Chosun, or whatever. You wrote some book and you did some amazing thing. You talk about your business, life, family experiences in Korea as a white dude, whatever you want to do. I could see someone standing up being like, why are you telling me, at the Q&A, why are you talking about Korea with some authority? Aren't you just a clueless white dude just talking about Korea? And there are a lot of those people.
I'll tell you,
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'm going to admit something to you. Honestly, Mike, that's actually one main reason I haven't done it.
Done what?
Written that book. Yeah.
Well, I feel you because I'm trying to get my book, a commercial book project going or something like that. And I'm told by people, I was told by a friend who kind of like took me aside. I was writing a cover letter for a Korean studies position that I didn't even get an interview, but that's fine. It's hard to get a tenure track job these days. So she read my cover letter and was like, yo, do you have a Korean name? And I'm like, no, never made one. My mom never made one. And she's like, well, you might want to get one. And I'm like, nah, it's not really my identity. I don't really have a Korean name. It would feel fake and disingenuous. And she's like, do you want a job in America teaching Korean studies? And I'm like, yeah, obviously that's what I'm doing. She's like, then you need to get a Korean name.
Oh my.
So, that's how America works these days. I mean, and I understand some of the reasons, but unfortunately, it's a little bit of a simplistic kind of identity politics-based thinking.
Yeah, and it's the reason why on TV shows they want me to do everything except appear on camera.
Yeah, the optics aren't right. So
yeah,
in my own department, I was the back in the day, I was the TA for Korean American history, under the guy who taught Korean American guy, who taught Korean American history, and when the guy said, I'm not going to do it anymore, he got a position at another university. He's like, I can't do this class. I was clearly the person who should continue the class as the instructor of record, as a grad student. But even amongst my own people, they were like, yeah, the optics aren't right. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, so they approached another grad student who was a Korean American grad student, fully Korean American, the right names and appearance, face and everything. And she was like, why are you not talking to Michael Hurd? He TA'd that class for like 2 semesters under the dude. He knows the class. And they're like, yeah. So because she didn't take it, kudos to her. They were like, you want to teach the class? And I was like, you know what? I kind of don't want to teach the class just on principle and fuck you. But yeah, I want to teach the class because I need to be teaching that class, for the experience and for my CV and all that other stuff. So yeah, that's a thing.
Hey, you know what? And this is great too. This is a great discussion. We should be focusing on Squid Game.
Whoa,
we're having a good time here. Okay, there's some cultural things that I wanted to point out. Anyone can think of any cultural things from the first 2 episodes that people that might have gone over some people's heads. One thing was I remember when they were at the ATM. Trying to figure out the 4-digit code, and he was going for birthdays, and he was going for his mother's lunar birthday. He's like, oh no, that's her lunar birthday. She's like, that's what he says. I was like, when's your mom's birthday? And you don't know your mom's birthday? And she's like, no, she's got 3 birthdays. And I'm like, that my wife is the same way. She's got 3 birthdays.
Well, I mean, it turned out the actual correct code was his birth.
His daughter's birthday. His daughter's birthday.
Gihon's birthday, yeah.
Good guess, right? So, yeah. So that made, but also that's the sort of thing that, I could see a translator, if it happens to be a difficult thing to explain, some really specific cultural number or something, just skipping over it.
No, and that's fine. It's fine to do that. And then you go on the internet and you look up, well, why was this a thing? Or you get a podcast like this, and we'll tell you. Okay, it's the lunar birthday thing.
And if
another one,
then it worked.
Yeah, I got one more. I meant to get some more of them. One was, I bet you there's that part in episode 2, and Sang-woo is sitting in the bathtub.
Oh yeah.
And he has what looks, some people might mistake that for incense, that he's just relaxing in a bathtub with some incense. when in fact
That's
it was a yontan, a charcoal briquette.
Yeah, and that's a common way of committing suicide. So
Yeah, so people don't know that he was committing suicide. He was trying to commit suicide. He wasn't relaxing with some incense.
which is actually the same thing that happened. What's the DP documentary? That DP in the first episode, the guy he's after does that very thing, commits suicide that very way. And yeah, so the point is, right? He failed at committing suicide. So I think people could be like, yeah, what was the deal with that burning that charcoal thing?
What was he burning, right?
Yeah, so I was trying to think of, I couldn't think of any other parts in the first 2 episodes that people would question, like, what was this about?
And I feel like, though, that's kind of a hard one to deal with in translation. That's just one of those things that it's not linguistically presented. So you just might have to, figure it out along with other parts of the narrative. Visuals.
Yeah, I think some other parts were Sebyok. And some of them, sometimes, guys, I might call them by like their translations because Sebyok is kind of like Dawn.
Yeah, it threw me off a bit because I was like, oh, wait, right. This is the translation of what her name is.
Yeah, Dawn, Dawn. Dawn River. River Dawn.
The thing that I liked about that, I didn't know, I never saw or dealt with the dubbing or the other translation. Dawn is a really great. It's the fact that they translated the name for the English name is a really good move because she was complimented about her name from the other person before she died.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
So it's not a rare name in English, but Dawn is it's one of those like names that's a little bit unusual. Like I knew a girl in elementary school named Tuesday. Like, so that's a choice. That's a real choice, right?
Yeah.
Like, why'd you name Tuesday? Then I thought about it. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
But when it comes off the tongue in Korean, Sebyok, it doesn't sound very feminine to me, or modern feminine.
Yeah, it's
like Jia is very feminine.
Yeah,
has vowels in it.
I think the thing in Korea that's maybe harder because to convey, because Dawn is more common, I think, as an American English name. Other countries, but like Dawn, like Sebyok in Korean is a little bit like what? Stop the conversation. What's your name? It's a little bit more unusual, I think. Yeah,
it's more unusual, and they're trying to point out that she had a North Korean accent. And my wife was like saying, yeah, North Korean, but it feels like a fake North Korean accent.
Yeah,
it's like North Korean, but not very good.
That's the problem. I had a big problem with that scene, but then again, I thought about it. And I was like, yeah, let me not die on this hill.
Yeah, it's
not the right one.
If you wanted to be actually accurate to the situations of North Korean kids, I teach in an NGO school for North Korean refugee kids. North Korean refugee kids. So I have kids who are those ages, and I've had 2 rounds of those kids. And the kids who've recently come through as the child of North Korean refugees, tend to be in the 14 to 16 range, they've all, their path out of North Korea, well, it was their parents' path out of North Korea, took them through China. All of them were born in China. They went to Chinese schools if they could go to school at all, and they all speak Chinese as their mother tongue. And all of my students speak Chinese with each other. In fact, one of the school's major problems is when they bring in North Korean refugee kids, is they have to be given a crash course in basic Korean. They don't know Korean either. So it's not accented Korean. If you want to accurately portray those characters, I think you would just have, when they were talking to each other, and he's like, oh, Nuna, he's like, don't abandon me. He's like, she's like trying to talk to her younger brother. I'm going to come back for you, even though she's not sure if she can.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to abandon her, her kid in the way that she was abandoned. That's obviously a major point for the character. Like in that intimate moment, 100,000% they would be speaking in Chinese to each other. The only way speaking Korean to each other would be if they're in some official situation. Like in my school, the school was like, can you please not speak Chinese, as much as possible. So, but the kids find it very awkward to speak to Korean to each other because most of them have learned it in the same way that if we got together and we're having a beer and we all learned a certain level of Korean, if we were talking Korean, you'd be like, we have to speak Korean to each other.
It depends on how drunk we are, because I start speaking Korean when I'm drunk. Yeah.
Yeah, but if we had to do it to like talk to each other socially, it would be super like, stop. It would be like, can we just talk? And,
Yeah.
Can we just use English? Like, what?
Yeah.
Why do we do? No, there are no Korean speakers here.
That's a good cultural point. I was also thinking about the scene where she was with the broker, where she threw the coffee in his face and stuff. And I'm not sure if people understood. Maybe they do. That it is very expensive and very, very shady. The industry of getting people out of the North.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I think South Koreans understand a little bit more than outside, because North Korea has been built up as this boogeyman, and as if it's like it's like this other place on another planet, and it's sort of like the myths built up around the American Mexican border.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that border is actually quite porous.
Yeah.
If you want to get out of North Korea, and you can if you have the money and the connections. It's not that hard if you have the money.
Crossing the Yalu River up north to China is not that hard, especially in winter.
And cultural flows go back and forth across that border quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So even the even the ongoing project of certain right-wing Christian types to fly the balloons full of USBs of, South Korean and international sunshine dramas and things like that. You don't have to do that, because if you know how porous the border is, if you really want to watch Korean dramas, which is super illegal, you can. I've talked to my so-called North Korean refugee kids. The older ones I had in the last batch, they actually went to elementary, middle, and high school in North Korea. So they're North Koreans. So they lived the life and actually traveled out. They had that arduous journey themselves. And I asked them, movies that they probably wouldn't have seen. I'm like, so did you see The Avenger? Do you know these movies? They're like, yeah, we saw them all. We know these movies. Yeah, we know. I'm not trying to get in their business too much, but my students know the basics. And a lot of them see films, in North Korea. I think if you really want to be like, I want to watch South Korean dramas and really get in trouble, you can, but if you just want to watch The Avengers or fucking Black Panther, you totally can, and it's not going to get you executed, shot off a cannon or something, which is, I think, the common misconception. Violate things and you get caught doing what a lot of people do, which is, watching, contraband items. There are different levels of punishment. You may be made to go to a re-education, seminar, you get some punishment. It's like detention. It's like you get caught with marijuana in America, which is illegal, but you don't get executed.
Yeah.
So I think some of those simplistic understandings of what it means to be North Korean, maybe will confuse American viewers, because it's, I think, represented. You get people like, I will not mention her name, the person who is very famous for being North Korean and getting paid for it and saying all kinds of weird things. So there's this idea that I think she exemplifies, that, she made it out of North Korea. It was like, crawling through barbed wire, and it was almost, it's obviously an arduous journey. She had a hard time, but it's not like climbing over the Berlin Wall in the 70s or something. Yeah.
So, one thing I wanted to ask Emma, what are your thoughts of Gihon now? Do you think he's a likable character?
He's growing on me. I know, the first episode definitely, for almost the first episode, it was weird. I went from I can't stand this guy. How am I supposed to sympathize with this guy?
Yeah,
actually very,
everything
very,
I hate about.
Yeah, and a lot of that was in the beginning when he took his mother's money and went and used it at the horse races. I was
lazy,
oh my god,
his mom is he's just sitting there like a child. His mom waiting.
You deserve everything. I feel no sorries for you.
Gambling weakness. Yeah.
And your mom is gonna get her feet cut off, and it's just no, like you said, no sorries. So he's not easy to sympathize with. And then, it's
It's kind of like episode 1. They were really setting up to be really unlikable. I mean, he's crappy to his daughter, and I just didn't feel sorry for him. I'm like, when they said that they were going to take his daughter to America, like his ex-wife and her stepfather were going to take her to. I'm like, good.
Yeah.
Get away from this toxic dad.
And,
you don't deserve.
What a bad, person, because that's not a dilemma. If you actually give a crap about your daughter, you look at your life, you're betting on horse races and people coming to like cut you up and kneecap you. Like, you're obviously not cut out to be a father. If you got your daughter's like, personal jealousy, whatever, you're a loser, who cares? Your daughter's going to go off and have a better life. You should be happy about that. That's not a crisis.
This hit me kind of personally because I'm not sure people know about this, but one of the reasons I came to Korea was I had to pay. It was for my children, and I had to leave my children from my first marriage to come to Korea so I could support them. At the time, because at the time, this is during the .com bust, and it was so difficult to find a job that would pay my extraordinary, really high child support at the time. And so I had to make a choice, and I had to come here. And I'm like, so I made the sacrifice, and that's why I was like, I don't really feel sorry for you because you haven't even tried anything.
Yeah,
well,
like
in trying something is going to the races,
right.
Yeah.
And even then, but see, like even then, there was kind of like a niggle in the back of my head, like, hold on there, Em. Because like the one thing I do kind of I have a grasp of is addiction and how strong it can be. And for him, he's obviously addicted to gambling. For me, I had a birth father who was addicted to alcohol, and he loved us kids to death, but could not get his shit together to be a good father for us. And then eventually, he did let us go. My mom got remarried and he stepped back and let us get adopted by my dad. So like kind of watching that scene, I was like, oh my God, this guy is such an asshole. I have no sympathy, blah, blah, blah. But then I made that connection. I'm like, oh God, okay. But I'm like, no, don't do it, Em. He's not, don't feel sorry for him.
Yeah, they were. It seemed like they were trying to do some things to try to make him seem empathetic, make him feel a relatable, or okay. So he had the worst day of his life. He's beaten up by thugs. He signed away his organs. His money was stolen. He disappointed his daughter, but then he gave some fish to a cat. Yeah, that's what good people do. Yeah, I'm just like, was that enough?
But that's the thing. That's what, in a way, what made it kind of Korean. And a lot of things don't make a certain kind of, I guess, logical, textual sense, in the way that you might watch something as a Western viewer, like me. I'm a Western viewer, But, the moment that I kind of gave in to the character, I was like, okay, I'm with this dude, is when he's going up for the game and they're registering in the machine, and then he takes the picture, right? And he just, most people are like, let me just get through this process. I don't know what's going on. And he just completely opens up and gives this big shit-eating grin.
Clown face.
And and I was like, you are so stupid, dude. You have and I was just like, wow, you're so stupid that I'm down with you.
Yeah, it's like, I guess I'm gonna root for you now.
You're the gambling Forrest Gump. All right.
He's just, in a way, he's an innocent, and it makes no sense. But you're just like, okay, he won me over. You're not a bad person, even though.
And later on, it's like it's contrasting him between Gihon and Sangu, where they both grew up in the same neighborhood.
And they're part of the same family, so I can see in that he's in a way, he does everything wrong, and he's a disappointment probably to his mom, to his older brother, all these things, but he's not at base a bad person. As the cat, and that totally guileless, unsuspecting smile that he gave kind of points out. And you can kind of see how people would always ask him, like, how are you two even related? Like, how did the SNU, what is he, business school guy related to
Yeah.
How are you of the same blood?
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of like, yeah, in the way that the character presents his characteristics, it doesn't make sense necessarily that you'd like them.
Yeah.
Then again, when people fall in love with, certain people, when people make the bad choice, when everybody's asking that one friend, why do you always choose a certain kind of guy, whatever. Like people fall for people. It doesn't make sense.
You're hitting close to home to me again, Mike.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely in the first 2 episodes, they don't really give you a whole lot to make you want to root for him. I mean, it's almost kind of like when he gets to that point at the end of the second episode where he makes the decision to go back, you're kind of like, oh, I feel like that was like the first truly sort of selfless decision we could see from him at that point. He's like, well, he knows he's probably going to die, but there's a chance that he could win all this money. Hopefully he's going to use that money, to help his mother, to, help his daughter, hopefully be a better father, knowing full and well there's every chance that he's going to be dead tomorrow.
Yeah. And so that's honestly, I really I like the second episode the best because it brought you back into Seoul, into in Incheon. By the way, if you go on our website, I have a link to a map I'm putting together of all the shooting locations. There are a lot. I've been working on it.
Yeah, you're just like Mr. Internet Detective with that. Like, how on earth finding the 7-Eleven? I can't believe you found that 7-Eleven.
Exactly the one.
You did? Oh,
yeah. Okay. So I knew.
That's thinking ahead, dude. When tourism comes back, I hope you turn that into a tour.
But they're scattered everywhere, though. That's the trouble.
They're all over Seoul.
Yeah, but I might, we'll see. But the thing, how I found it, because they're like, I knew it was a 7-Eleven in Yoedo, but there are like 10 of them. So I'm looking at I'm checking the screens, and then I saw in the background of one of them is there's a banner for a Paris baguette.
Yeah.
So I did street view and I hunted for a 7-Eleven with a Perry baguette next to it, and I found it.
Nice. That was a nice move. Because that, with Parasite, all the places like, the bridge, the stairwell, the long stairwell, they've all become tourist attractions.
They have been. They're too far apart, though, to do a tour.
Yeah.
Someone's done a tour. Some people have made tours, and I did not do a Parasite tour because it did feel like poverty exploitation. I did. There's something poverty porn, something like. I didn't do it because of that. Yeah, but I really like that one. Some points, Ali.
Yeah, we met we were introduced to pretty much all the main characters in the first 2 episodes, right? We've got Ali, Sebyok, Doksu the gangster, Sangu, Hyun, the Han, what's her name? Crazy single mom.
Han Minyo. So I call her like
Minyo, yeah.
Pretty one.
Yeah.
Pretty woman.
Well, wait.
Though we don't really know how important she's going to be to the story, I think, in the first 2 episodes. I think that comes later on in the third episode.
That's the one who she's trying to use her body and connections and get in with whoever, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's in the later episodes. That's
in a later episode. But yeah, that's who we're talking about with the curly hair.
Yeah. And she did such a good job.
I think her acting was great. Her performance was just so much fun to watch.
And if you see her in the first one, in terms of how she was the first one to get down on her knees and beg. I was like, yeah, I feel like this character is going to become a character. And she did. But yeah, I feel like I wanted to say something about how in the Korean setup of the characters, like the setup isn't so simplistic and predictable, because it's sort of like, I'm thinking back to Navy SEALs. This is a very like American Hollywood trope, like when the black guy who needs to die in the 80s movie, the black guy in Navy SEALs is introduced, and everybody attends his wedding, he's suddenly an important character. All the buddies are like, "Yeah, your new wife is beautiful," and then just before their big mission, I just found out my wife's having a baby. I'm like, dude,
you're gonna die.
You are gonna die.
They point this out that Netflix show about Hollywood tropes that just came out. That they talk about that in there.
Do they? Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I'll have to check that out.
Like the setup.
Yeah.
Like
If someone's about to retire, they're gonna die.
yeah, they're gonna die.
If they just had a baby and they tell you about their family, they're gonna die in the next scene.
Yeah,
If it's just that one last mission.
yeah, and that's kind of the way that Korean setups. Like Korean doesn't so clearly tropically telegraph everything that's going to happen to these characters. Sometimes, I think the Korean drama way, cinematic way, is just sometimes random shit just happens.
Well, there's some shorthand, and I did point out there were some Korean drama archetypes, and actually some of these I actually got from a Korean drama websites, and there are some I would say.
Korea has its own tropes, but
one I would say like Gihon fits what I call the schlubby protagonist. The world-weary, usually lazy ajashi who is a loser but is somehow likable. And I would say that would be like Park Gang-do in The Host.
Yeah.
Played by Song Kang-ho.
Yeah.
And also Kim Ki-taek, the father in Parasite, also played by Song Kang-ho.
At the same time.
He doesn't play the same character. It's this schlubby loser protagonist.
Schlubby, likable loser.
And then another one that I see a lot. I would like to maybe come up with a better name. I call him the Cool Hand Yoja. Kang Se-byuk and a little bit Gihon, who's a character that'll come up later. Kang Se-byuk really portrayed that. Is this James? I describe it as a James Dean style young woman who hardly has any facial expressions and always looks bored. And if the censors would allow it, she would always have a cigarette dangling from her lips and tends to not give a fuck.
Smoking Korean girl is a big trope.
Yeah, so like I remember Captain Jang in Space Sweepers, Itaewon Class, Jo Yu-sol, and then a little bit Ki-jong in Parasite, the daughter in Parasite, a little bit.
Yeah, like you're the very worldly girl.
They have the stone face, and they never say anything. I don't see these people in real life. That's why I'm pointing this out.
A lot of the tropes. That stone-faced young girl who is more worldly than she lets on, she's often wearing a school uniform. She's a high school girl. She's tough. She's sassy.
Oh yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
And they're
smoking, and they always talk with their bottom lip.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one would be the psychotic villain. Would be the antagonist with zero redeeming qualities. That's what it is. It's usually, it's not like Killmonger where you kind of agree with him in Black Panther. The villains in Korean drama tend to have nothing redeeming. So I was like Jang Dok-soo. I can't find anything. He's the gangster guy. I can't find anything redeeming about him. It's kind of like in Itaewon Class, Jang Gun-won, who was he was the main villain's son that was just causing all the trouble with everyone.
He was just straight up evil, and I'm like,
nothing. You keep wanting someone to be redeemed. Maybe they'll find the errors of their ways, and they'll have growth as a character. But usually these guys have zero growth the entire time.
I mean, the thing that bothered me is I felt like, when is he going to start twirling his mustache?
Yeah, it's a mustache twirl.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I do feel like that's one reason the tropishness of those kind of dramatic tropes, I think, in Korean dramas is what makes me not be into them. And I think the only reason I addicted to American style tropes is just because I'm American. But I let that.
You just see growth. The last one is the most controversial one. One I'm trying to. It's something I've just noticed because I'm a foreigner, but I've come up with an offensive name for it. It's the minstrelized foreigner. A little
wretched types.
Well, it's like the Korean speaking foreigner. Usually, but not always, person of color who tends to smile a lot and represents innocence, almost like an infant in an infantile way. It's like everyone kind of talks normally, and then the foreigner, you expect the foreigner to have an accent, but they act so zippity doodah.
Mm.
You
So
see that?
would you say that applies to the Ali character?
A little bit. I would say the 7-Eleven scene is a little too submissive, just groveling in that one, too smiley in that one. I mean, his introduction in the red light, green light game was amazing.
Yeah,
That was great.
that was really great.
And then there are other parts where he just gives these innocent eyes. I don't think it's his performance either. I think it's just the way he's written. Is they make him like that.
I think for me, that trope kind of has like a clear ideological reason to exist. Because I think in order to, for a foreign, because I think they wanted to put the foreigner, and nothing's more foreign than the foreign worker who's usually brown in Korea. Even 노동자, when you say that in Korean, you think of a brown person. But like 외국인 근로자, like you think of like a Indian, South Asian person. So he is the ultimate embodiment of that. So if you want to include that person, you've got to make them guileless and innocent.
Yeah, really innocent. Itaewon Class, Kim Tony was it was kind of like that. He was always, every single scene almost, he had a big giant grin on his face. Everyone's all serious and everything and pouting, and no matter what, just grinning all the time.
To the end, the happy-go-lucky person. So I guess that maybe that. So when you said zippity doo dah, I'm like, okay, I'm getting that.
Minstrelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to find the name of this movie, and it was over 10 years ago, but it starred this very flash in the pan comedian who had this weird dance that was on ads. They were staying at a Goshiwon, like a hanok that was a Goshiwon. Huh?
Oh, you're talking about a Korean drama or movie?
Yeah, it's a Korean film. Yeah, Korean movie. It was a comedy. It was it was not funny at all, and it was an international group. Or no, it was people from different parts of society, like students and stuff, living at this Goshiwon. And one was a white foreigner with curly hair whose name was George, but he kept referring to himself as Joji. And they really infantilized him, as in he would never use a pronoun. He talked like Tarzan the whole time. 조지 싫어. 조지 배고파요. 조지, like that, And always like that.
I think there's the minstrelizing. That person's very funny to maybe a Korean audience, but also there's that whole trope of, it became a trope in Korean documentary, like NBC documentaries, where there was almost like this self-flagellating tendency in Korean documentary news to like cover the travails of foreign workers, brown foreign workers.
It feels sorry to take pity and to take pity,
and,
not to give them agency.
In the act, I guess, of like, 우리 얼마나 나쁘게 하고 있는, like we're mistreating these foreigners so bad, we really have to rethink how we did it. We really have to fix our society. So it almost became the kind of like performance of this, kind of progressive narrative, in a way showing that we can be self-critical and think, we have to change Korea to some extent. It became the safe zone to kind of this performance of, seeming socially progressive. To the point where that person became like, you remember this? The almost a comedian's comic trope where I don't remember the person who played this, but I remember seeing this on TV. The person kind of making fun of, but not quite making fun of, but sort of like drawing in this empathetic, I don't know if this is too far, but making fun of the foreign worker in a way, in this hapless way, where you remember 사장님 너무 나빠요. 사장님은 나빠요.
Nah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it almost became not making fun of that, but making fun of the foreigner, but making fun of that kind of haplessness.
That infantilization, I still call it. Yeah.
And yeah, so that 사장님 나빠요, that chant, that phrase cannot have been lost, I think, on Korean audiences when Ali kept calling him 사장님.
Yeah, that was true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yo, dude, I'm not a 사장님. Stop calling me that. He kept calling out of deference, out of default.
Yeah, he kept calling him sir in English. I think it was translated as sir in English.
It was translated sir in English.
Don't call me sir. My dad is sir. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was like, okay, sir.
But I felt like those are handles that the Korean audience can really wrap their minds around. For better or for worse.
Yeah.
So
when I watch it, I cringe.
yeah, it's cringy. It's very cringy. And I think the non-Korean audience was kind of like, what's going on there? And tries to make sense of it. Actually, on Twitter again, I'm trying not to get too much into Twitter. There was an academic who said that this really maps well with the noble savage trope in American. I was like, and then I was like, nope, that's not where we need to be talking about. Wrong Indian. wrong. So I was like, there's a Korea-based trope that has a specific history and a specific ideological use for this place. You don't have to go for the ideological use of the noble savage and why we had to believe that
we're trying to transplant, and that's why I'm saying this a lot with a lot of these articles is all these very Americentric articles placed on this. It's man, the Americans just cannot get out of America in their heads. It cannot.
Yeah. And I think that's where we have run into a lot of problems because we started the conversation with the viral. Was it a tweet that she made? The complaint about the translation?
It was TikTok. It was a TikTok video.
Okay. So the TikTok that she made, I mean, that was a very American kind of critique, even though it was based on Korean knowledge. But in the end, she was trying to go viral. But yeah, a lot of the critiques that I see being made are very poorly informed, and even the way she got a lot of attention on BuzzFeed. I think it was just because there's not that many easy to access so-called cultural experts. So her video was like the one they drew from, and who's going to disagree based on what?
That's a thing that kind of bugs me too. Is when the news organizations are looking for cultural experts, they don't look in the actual country they're talking about. One example, one just came out today was like the ultimate Korean fried chicken recipe, and they were pulling in all of these suggestions and knowledge and recipes from all of these chefs, and they had some of them are friends, but none of them live in Korea full time.
It's an old problem, right? When you draw upon, you need to access Korean knowledge. You know, basically, and this is what happens with the with the awkwardness of the VIPs. That conversation is a big one too. The awkward dubbing. Like, the problem I think that's long been with Korea is, or Korean concerns is you just ask your Korean American intern, who often doesn't speak the language at a adult educated in Korean level, to translate a document, and because of other issues, the person may not be like, yo, I don't speak Korean like that, Jack, and tries to translate a document that they shouldn't be attempting, or they get their uncle's next door neighbor's friend to do whatever job, and the search is pretty poor, and I think that's what happens with in country domestic dubbing, which is why you get the arirang effect with how do those guys talk?
Oh, we're talking about on arirang. We tend to
No,
talk
they-
a little bit more like George Takei.
Yeah. Or, like the VIPs were like, I do not need a drink right now.
Oh, you're talking about it later on. We haven't gotten to that episode yet, but yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, when you get a bunch of people who are like, no, I would like you to pass the salt, please. Then, I think Korean ears are like, yeah, that sounds like a foreigner to me. And a lot of people don't know that the voice talent is told to speak like that because that's what Koreans want to hear.
Yeah.
Mhm.
When it's an international audience, people are like, why are they talking like that?
Why? Yeah.
And then they blame the actors for this. And they're like,
Right.
they're like, I'm trying to say stuff naturally, but at the end of the day, they won't pay me unless I do it this way.
Yeah. In fact, that's a thing that comes up a lot with voice acting. When I've done voice jobs too, I've been given a script that is grammatically incorrect, or shut up. There are problems in the words, and I'm like, yo, I think this is wrong. Can I just change it to? They're like, no, read it as is, because we have people watch this.
So
And he goes,
there are some really weird lines. We're going to discuss it later because we booked. We'll see how things go. But we've booked one of the VIPs on a future episode to talk about it. One of the actors to talk about it. Yeah, we'll talk about that one. But I can't have Michael Hurt, the Metropolitan, on this topic without. What do you think that? What do you think is the social commentary of Squid Game?
Of Squid Game?
Or do you think it's too bunk on the head? Or do you think there's?
Well, I don't know. I've been reading around, and some of these ideas are partially not mine, but I do think one of the reasons this has such traction is very similar to the reason a lot of Korean cultural contents have international traction, is because this is a very universal problem, but expressed in a really specific Korean way that's kind of more interesting than the way you experience that problem. That, for example, is a huge stressor in American society, but it usually tends to be like, college loans, mortgages, certain standard kind of debt, not some dude's going to come and break your knees kind of debt. Like loan sharks,
Right. Yeah.
plays as much of a role in that direct pressure from debt.
Yeah, and that was a big deal in after the financial crisis, the Asian financial crisis in 1997, around the turn of the century, was people were dealing a lot with loan sharks back then.
Yeah, and that's the thing in Korean society. You can borrow money easily and get into a lot of trouble real fast with dudes coming to get you.
There's lots of failed businesses, lots of small failed businesses. I mean, that was true in Parasite as well. They had a Costella shop, and that's a trend that just disappeared. I don't remember what did he have before. What did Gihon have before? He had two businesses that failed.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't he have restaurants?
Chicken place, right?
Yeah.
A chicken place. He had a chicken place because that's what everyone does.
I think one was a chicken place.
Yeah.
It's really cool how they took that specific way of being in debt in Korea and that kind of stress, and the fact that he has been a successful businessman before, but so have a lot of Korean people. Because the standard thing to do when you get moved out of your middle management job, you're in your 50s or something like that, is you can't get another job like the one you had before.
Nope.
You open up a chicken restaurant, or you open up a coffee shop.
Or you're a taxi driver.
Yeah, or drive a taxi, the easiest way. And that's how lives change on a dime like that with debt.
That's why we have such a saturation of cafes and restaurants here.
There's a zillion coffee shops on a corner.
Taxis wherever you go.
And I feel like that's a really specific domestic concern that's real. But since debt is, a crushing force in many societies across the world, this is the issue that a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm thinking about that. I live in precarity. I think that's the whole thing that made Squid Game work. It's the precarity the precariousness that people live in is hugely stressful. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't know I don't have loan sharks coming at me, but I get what's going on in this show.
Yeah.
Right.
And Corona's really brought it to the fore, and in America we have so many problems with home evictions and things like that, and predatory lending still.
And maybe in a way, I don't know. This is just a leap. It's a stretch. I think many Americans have been living in a state of precariousness for so long. It's become normal.
I could see, yeah.
And then Corona made that like, oh, suddenly you're homeless and a loser. Suddenly, you have all this stress that you never had before. Suddenly,
while Jeff Bezos is going into space because he made so much money because of this.
Yeah. And that's just ridiculous. But
good Lord.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is because I've always felt like Korean life is very much like you're rich, you're on top right now, and now you're a bum. Like I think 1997 is I know I'm not supposed to say bum anymore, but 1997 financial crisis. I think that's where Korea got checked, and people were reminded that you're only one bad day, like the Joker. You're only one bad day from the bottom of the well. And I think America kind of got smacked into that space really hard, even though a lot of people already lived there. But I think a lot of people who thought they lived under the illusion that they weren't there are now like, oh shit, I think I'm there. In fact, maybe I was always there. I just never realized it.
Yeah.
Corona did. That's the Corona smackdown on American society.
How vulnerable you are with student loans and with health insurance.
Oh yeah,
and mortgages and rent, and so many people will rent.
And that's the funny thing. American society and Corona got so smacked hard by Corona that think about it. Universal basic income was like, ha ha, you're crazy. That'll never happen.
Communist.
So communist.
Yeah. And then, you got Trump like, here's your checks. Here's your checks.
And everybody's like, give me more checks. And you're like, man, are you still not down with universal income?
Yeah. And it's funny, I think maybe this is the ultimate best post-Corona drama. Maybe that's one reason it had.
Yeah, because I was wondering why it's gotten as big. I can see why it would be popular, as in like, oh, this is the most popular Korean show on Netflix of all time. But I didn't expect it to be the most popular, like bigger than Tiger King.
Yeah,
popular.
Yeah, I was not expecting. I mean, I had when it did like reach like the most watched show on Netflix anywhere, I still hadn't watched it yet.
Yeah,
and I was still just like, what is going on with this?
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't watch it until my daughter in the U.S. said it was her favorite thing, and she's not a Korea boo at all.
Mm-hmm. My best friend was like, this show is wild. You need to watch it. And I'm like, okay, just let me know. Are we talking like Saw level goriness? Like, what's this violent situation going on? She's like, it'll rip you up. It'll tear you apart and rip you up, but not because necessarily of the violence. It'll just
I was surprised. It wasn't really the gore. It was more the tension.
It's not the gore.
Because the gore was kind of cartoony.
Mm-hmm. The thing I liked about the Squid Game violence is that it wasn't gratuitous. It's passed out, and violence comes with ease. But I think that's why it wasn't gratuitous. I mean, you scratch. I'm sorry, I don't want to. You twitch after she stops singing, and your head explodes, or it doesn't. And, to me, the violence is seemingly heartless and random, but it's not. And maybe that's
the blood is kind of like I was telling Emma is like, think of it like this is a film done by by Wednesday Addams from the Addams Family.
Yeah.
So like that part of it doesn't actually. I was like pleasantly surprised. I'm like, oh, okay, I can handle this. And then it just reaches it's just like the story, the characters out. That's what like it takes it, to the nth level of effed upness. And I'm like, I can't do this. I can't.
That's one reason I feel like in Korean cinema you get that kind of contradiction that doesn't make sense, but it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Mo's talked about that with the host. Like you've got scenes which are seriously like people going through fucked up shit and painful shit, like the funeral in the host for the little girl who hadn't died yet.
Oh yeah,
and they're
I
all
that.
crying. They're going through the whole motions, and they're all falling on the floor, and it's hilarious. Like in the red light green light game, watching people red light. Some of the people dying, and the whole scene itself is ridiculous. I mean, it's horrible, but it's also really funny.
And then especially that moment where you see like player number 1, the old man, and he's just like, I got this.
That's when it gets fun, is when he starts, when he gets it in and he starts playing.
Well, and I've noticed with some of the games, I can't remember if it's in red light, green light, but I do know it's in a couple of the games after that. They just have like, it's just this crazy contrast where they flip into some sort of almost lighthearted music. And the game takes on this very lighthearted tone, and yet you can just hear the gunshots going on, and you see like the blood spraying in the background. But yet, what you're like watching, what's in the foreground, is just like an almost sort of humorous moment.
Yeah,
you kind of like you're smiling and laughing and enjoying it, but at the same time, and then you see like blood fly out, and you're just like, I don't know, am I wrong for enjoying this? For being entertained at this scene? Like, I feel I need to reevaluate myself as a person and a human being. It also helps
that the colors are so pastel.
It was
intentional.
Very childlike.
They made everything. In fact, the color. I have this in my trivia too. I'm gonna do trivia next time because we're running.
Yeah, we're a bit over.
But the what they're wearing is based on actual Korean school gym outfits.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing that I liked, even with the red light, green light from the beginning, like I didn't grow up in Korea again, but I've read, I've looked at, I've studied. Part of my dissertation was looking at Korean textbooks and the history of textbooks, the Dodok ethics curriculum specifically. But like when I saw the girl singing and the big robot, because that in itself is just this big hilarious kind of like, haha, we're just fucking with you. Like the sights are her eyes, and then the automated guns come from the girl, who is the most familiar Korean character to any Korean, because she is Young-hee. She's Dick and Jane, like in American, early childhood, right? So she's like the innocent, little, quintessential little Korean girl who's like
creepy doll.
How to read from. They learned all of their basic information in life from those basic textbooks, and she's illustrated. Young-hee is the person who spoke English to Chol-soo, back and forth. Like these are familiar characters, just fucking Xing them on the school ground in school uniform. Like Koreans are like, whoa, wow, this violence is actually familiar. Yeah. So if you grew up in the time when you know who Young-hee was, and you like had those uniforms on a dirt field, that kind of like random violence just kind of makes sense. It's kind of funny.
I know, so like with my Korean friends, it's two very different reactions. They either absolutely love Squid Game or they absolutely hate it. Like there's no in between with my Korean friends. There's no like, oh, it's okay. It's all like, oh my God, I love this show. It's the best thing ever. Or it's, oh my God, I really hate that show. I don't understand why everybody likes it. Like,
yeah, but it could only have happened on Netflix. No Korean broadcaster would ever have greenlighted it. No Korean broadcaster would
ever show that. Not on Korean television.
Yeah.
And that's one thing a pattern that I notice, I've talked about quite a bit, is in order to make that, for those kind of strange cultural texts to come out, or for certain kind of cultural auteurs to pop up and become known in Korea, you've got to do an end run around Korea. You've got to use the international field to succeed in.
I agree with that.
If you look at Psy, he was not only the bad boy, he was the one who was poo-pooed, had been through the scandals, the army thing. Was not the chosen one to become the golden child of K-pop. That was Girls' Generation, or which failed. I mean, not them, but they're
But Wonder Girls, I would say
Wonder Girls.
I'll put
Wonder
up there.
Girls, which was a big fat lie. Also, Rain,
Mhm.
Oh, Rain, yeah.
like Korean Americans and their friends.
And I was comparing this to Psy on the radio on TBS this past week. Yeah, this wasn't supposed to be the one that put that
That took it all.
that went global.
That's the thing. It went global, and I think that's one reason Korean folks these days are constantly like, "Oh, wait, that's a thing? How did that happen?" 'Cause
Yeah. What
Like, I don't get it.
Feel of this, and I said on the show too, is because it's unapologetically Korean. It's global because it's so Korean. It wasn't trying to go with what a Korean person's idea of what the West is or what Western is like.
That's a good example of what happened with the Wonder Girls too. Like the Wonder Girls, they were trying to push them so hard. They were like, "Yeah, you got to have them singing English songs.
Yeah,
like BTS.
they got dressed like Motown.
You got to be international to be international. But everything that goes viral, that goes crazy popular, is like super Korean.
Mhm.
No one thought that, okay, so the example, like, hype, like, Uber auteur, giant of Korean cinema. I don't want to talk shit, but Im Kwon-taek, director of Subtitling, he made his name. There's no doubt that he was the man, that he had a huge role in Korean cinema, but he was losing his shit. Like, did you ever see Chunhyang? His film version of the Korean legendary tale. Like that film was pushed as the, big film in like the early 2000s of like Korean cinema. Cultural, the Korean, what do you call the Korean embassies, the cultural centers were pushing this hard.
Yeah.
Frankly, the film was terrible. It was just, it's garbage.
Is up to like D-War?
Yeah, so it's D-War, but it's like basically like, oh, we have an internationalized version of Korean stuff. We catered to foreign audiences, so it must be good. And then you're like, what is this garbage? This is horrible. We don't want to watch this, and it fails. And then the movie that makes it big actually is Parasite, or actually before that,
Old Boy.
Old Boy, right?
Mhm.
That's weird. Incest and this kind of hyper violence and gangsters and scummy people. Why is that? That's not what the suits wanted to be.
Right.
Yeah, and Parasite. I would go for Parasite more because that's actually more Korean than Old Boy was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With super Korean specific problems and things. And I think sometimes Koreans are like, why is this? Why do they like that? That continues to be the pattern. That's why I get called on to shows like Arirang directed a lot, like to be like, what's going on? Like, why is Gangnam Style so popular? What the hell? Right? No one thought it would be that guy. Or that
I use the analogy of it's fish in a pond. The fish know their pond very well, but they also don't know what's unique about it. In fact, they don't even know that they're in water. But it's the ducks that go from pond to pond that actually know, they can see what the value is in all these places.
And the ducks drink that water, or maybe it tastes like roses in one pond, it tastes like lilies in the next pond, but none of the fish know it, right? To take your analogy.
The fish have the stuff that they like, they want to show the ducks, but the ducks are like, no, the other ducks aren't going to be interested in this. The people or the fish in the other ponds aren't going to be interested in this. They know what the fish in the other ponds like.
And I think
it's a weird analogy I'm using.
Well,
it's weird, but it works. It works.
You see, like, it was Psy, people forget. I don't know if other folks outside who, met Bong Joon-ho went after he became Mr. 4 Oscars and The Man, but he was on the blacklist, right? He was on
that's right.
blacklist, right? He was seen as a person we need to shut down. He's hurting Korea. He's hurting I
always saw him as just more of a third tier Weird Al personality.
Yes. But like, you continue to have these figures who come seemingly out of the blue for Koreans, but they make perfect sense when they get popular for people who are not Korean.
Yeah.
Because they're an international forum. So the biggest example is BTS, right?
Yeah.
They were not the chosen ones. They were not from the golden, entertainment companies, right? Nobody thought BTS would be shit. when they started out.
Well, I thought they looked on the track to be, it's like, okay, they'll be popular for 2 years and then they'll go away. Because EXO is rising at the same time they were, and who remembers EXO now?
Right.
Oh yeah, aren't they still something?
They are, but they're not as BTS level.
They're not BTS.
They were 2017. They were pretty much Steven with BTS.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And one of the things that BTS fans, I'm not one of these people who's knowledgeable, but BTS fans have this problem with is to be a BTS fan way back when they started. I don't even remember when that was. You had to be kind of special. You had to be kind of hardcore. You had a specific taste.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody likes BTS. They're kind of I'm not. Yeah, that's not what we wanted.
We're not special anymore.
Marvel, a Thor collector, back when that was not a cool thing to be, and suddenly Thor's like everything.
Oh, I know. It's always it's always cool until it becomes popular.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is fandom problems.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mike, and we're covering a bit. Please, everyone in the comments, please talk about your impressions, your thoughts about episodes 1 and 2 of Squid Game. And next week we'll try to do a live show on Friday, or maybe around 7:00 Korea time. We'll post it up on our Facebook page and our Twitter. You can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/SeoulPodcast. On our Twitter is at King Sejong. My name is Joe. Thank you, Mike,
Thanks for letting me rant at you.
Oh my.
We'll
have you back. Of course, as always, we'll have you back. Until next time, everyone, stay safe.
Bye.
The Soul Podcast is a production of Zen Kimchi International, copyright 2021, under the Creative Commons license. Parts of this podcast may be used for non-commercial purposes if you remember to give us credit. You can contact us at sejong@soulpodcast.com. That's SEJONG@soulpodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at King Sejong and on Facebook at facebook.com/SeoulPodcast. For a transcript of this episode, listen to it again and write down what you hear. See you next week. Until then, may you always be someone's oppa and not their dongsen. And certainly not their dongjin.